Good afternoon, people. I apologize for being on a little later. I tried to get on earlier. Every time that I go to my author page, Facebook decides it's going to crash on me. So, had to do a few alternative measures. I'm actually getting to you right now through the Page Manager app, which allows me to do stuff on Facebook. But a few things to talk about. I announced last week, Friday actually, that I was putting in my 2 weeks to my day job. I've done that. Sent them I sent them an email, but I printed it off to hand to them. Official resignation as of that day, and I've got 2 weeks, provided nobody gets pissed off and changes their mind to terminate me before then. But in 2 weeks, I will be a full-time author. So I've got my few concerns that, I wish my safety net that I'd been trying to build up was a little bigger than it is, but, I'll make it work either way. I'm going to hit the streets pretty hard, try to get books into local people's hands, hit bookstores, just try to get the name out. Once it starts growing in paper, then it'll start growing online as well, and then maybe I won't have to work so hard to try to keep it afloat. But there's that. I got my notes here. Hardback version of the book is available. That's available through Nook. It turned out fairly well. So the hardbacks are a little bit more pricey than the paperbacks are. So I'm not foreseeing that I'm going to keep a whole lot of those in stock, but I will try to at least take one or two of them to shows. That way, if people want a hardback as opposed to a paperback, they are more than welcome to get it. Right now, we've only got the first book in paperback. The second book is in and has been submitted, and then I'm still working on the manuscript of the third book right now. And then Damn It Brie, I'll probably put that in paperback pretty soon as well. Or, I'm sorry, hardback. That's all I got for that. As I already said, I'm still working on Order of the Trident 3. Exodus will be the subtitle for that one. It's proven a little hard. I had to change my style up when I started writing Damn It Brie, just due to the type of book it is. And while it was really hard to get into the catch of writing that one in the first place, now trying to go back to what I was writing before is proving difficult there. So I'll make it happen. It's been fighting me a little bit. Audiobooks, I've already told you in the past that those are underway, and that still remains the case. I haven't heard anything on them lately, but I'm sure that the people I've hired to take care of it are hard at work, and we'll get it done in a timely manner. Those for people that prefer audiobooks because they either don't have time to read or don't like to read. But audiobooks will be a great addition to the team. Upcoming appearances. I have been accepted to LibraryCon. A lot of people have posted on that, and I haven't done it as of yet. I actually need to go into my website and update a few things on that front. So LibraryCon, I will be in attendance. I will have, with the date, I'll have all three of the Order of the Trident books. I will have Damn It Brie. I should have some of my past work with Abyss Walker Entertainment. And if all goes according to plan, I might have another book out as well. As well as Where Rats Tale 4, if that one gets done on time. It's already done on my part. We're just waiting for the putting together of the book, so to speak. And then I have a appearance in Springfield next month. I'll have to check the dates again, but I want to say it's June 24th and 25th. It might be 25th and 26th. I'll have to look. But that's a prepper show that I was just invited to this morning to go and sell some books, and it looks like it's going to be a fun time, so we'll do that. Lastly, about the final thing that I want to say before I start reading the final chapter of Book 1 is I'd like to give a thank you to all of the friends and fans and just people that have encouraged me over the past few years. I definitely couldn't be where I am without you guys. You guys, you buy books, you leave reviews, you share whenever I've got a post that's worthy of being shared. You guys try to help get me or get my name out to other people, and for that, you have my gratitude. With what I do, it's kind of a lonely road most times, and you guys have made the journey down it a lot more enjoyable, so thank you. And I hope to continue to be there for you for a while longer. Let's get this underway, and then I'm going to get back to work. I've got to finish up at least one more chapter in order of the Trident 3 tonight. I have to write up a slightly different biography than what I already have, targeted to a specific audience. And I have to get that sent off with my headshot for another show I've got coming up. And then I have to write my blog post tonight. So, Chapter 19, The Drew War. The moonlight blared down upon the grassy plains of Shadgold. A light fog slowly drifted in along the plains, delivering a calm but potentially deadly night to the people of Dalmora. Armies stood throughout the massive grasslands, assembled and awaiting orders. The Brianna, please get out of here. It's not time to play. Please go.
But I wanted to listen.
You don't need to listen. If you're going to listen, you can sit over there, be quiet, and listen. Kids. The Murghafar were split into several battalions and positioned along the human armies. Colors littered their mass, displaying blues, greens, reds, and orange. The southern nations had come together for the first time since the construction of Heroes Gate. The races of Murghafar and men stood ready, their archers at the rear, awaiting the command to rain death upon the Drufar. Brianna, this is a little bit more difficult with you standing over my shoulder. If you're going to be in here, sit down over on the bed and wait.
Okay, I'm gonna go get my phone.
The Drufar army spanned as far as the eye could see. They made no attempt to hide their numbers, lining the far side of the field by the thousands. Shouts echoed across the vast plains, preparing the formed units for the night's adventures. Several Jeruki marched behind their soldiers, awaiting orders from their commanders. The drums of war bounced along the flat terrain, leaving both sides with a steady tune of death and despair. Ravion, Cain, and Malachi stood at the head of one of the large groups, the men behind them all wearing the symbols of the Tower and Trident, their red and green capes flowing in the night's breeze. Ravion looked at his brothers. It appears war is finally upon us. So it would seem, Cain replied. Have you heard from Gareth or Crinan? Ravion shook his head. No, Gareth hasn't returned from the catacombs, and Crinan hasn't been heard of since we asked him to speak with the orcs. Maybe the orcs will arrive with him shortly, Malachi interjected. It's possible, but unlikely, Ravion rebuted. I've had many dealings with the orcs in Krondar. I doubt they'll be much help considering their relationship with the Alfar. They nodded their agreement. I would have thought Gareth to be here. It's rare for him to miss an opportunity like this, Cain added. Aye, but if he was in the catacombs, I'm sure he's having his own fun in there, Ravion sighed. Once we're done here, we'll go search for him. Malachi replied, I'll join you. That needs to be reordered. That doesn't work well. As Malachi speaking said, I'll join you. 2 heads are better than 1. That is, unless you're fighting a Hydra. I've heard that's not much fun. He chuckled at his statement, realizing how ridiculous it sounded. The 3 took a final look around, knowing hell was about to break loose. The battle horn sounded, alerting Osiris to prepare his reapers. Both armies charged toward one another, the sounds of their footsteps and battle cries drowning out the drums of war. Archers fired their load, launching a volley of flaming arrows into the Drufar forces. Before the wooden shafts hit the ground, they had another set ready and lit. The Drufar did the same, returning unlit arrows to catch the surface dwellers off guard. Ravion dodged and ducked the wicked shafts, making his way toward his enemy. Cain was nearly struck, the arrow glancing off his thick breastplate. Another inch and it would have struck home. Malachi felt the iron head tear through his flesh, leaving a shallow but painful graze across his arm. He glanced at the minor flesh wound, growling his anger at the approaching army. The armies collided with an explosion of bodies and blood, neither one yielding to the other. Ravion cut and dodged, avoiding strike after strike. His brothers did likewise. Within minutes, the field was swarming with soldiers of two sides, each one in all-out combat, fighting for their lives. The archers of both sides continuing firing their arrows, choosing a single target in the chaos. Cain dodged a scimitar, realizing his greatsword was too bulky for the close-quarters combat. Tossing to the blood-soaked field, he drew his short sword and dagger. He sliced one Jurufar, ducking a swing from another. To his surprise, it was remarkably easy to hold the wicked curved blades at bay, almost as if they weren't trying to claim ground. Malachi spun around, stabbing his sword into one of the Jurufar's back. Retracting the blade, he threw his shield up, blocking another attack. Pushing off, he brought the protective barrier down, breaking the arm of the Jurufar in front of him. It was one thing to hide behind the steel, quite another to turn it into a weapon. Seeing an opening, he stabbed his sword into the chest of the broken-armed Jurufar, releasing the blade. He reached under his shield and flung a small, balanced dagger into another. Before the Jurufar fell backward, he grabbed his sword and ripped it free. The three held their own, cutting down foe after foe, but the battle was young, and thousands more Jurufar flooded toward them. The glowing fungus faded into memory, returning to known territory. Gareth felt the beads of sweat running down his face, his hatred exhausted but still present. It was directed more than just the Jurufar. He felt an equal hatred for himself. He felt the pain inside his body, begging for a break. Unable to take another step, he leaned against the cavern wall, feeling his legs buckle. Sliding down the wall, he found himself on the hardened clay floor. Out of breath, he pulled the brown leather satchel to him. Inspecting the bag, he flipped the wooden button through the small leather hoop and opened the flap. The shimmering black book stared at him, begging his attention. He removed the strange book and opened it to the center. To his surprise, all the pages were blank, taunting him. Why the hell do I need a blank book? A single drop of blood and sweat rolled off his cheek, landing on the flaky page. He watched in wonder, seeing it spring to life, his blood revealing the secrets hidden within. At least it would if he understood a single word of what was written. He flipped through the pages, looking at the various pictures and strange markings. He ran his finger over the dark red scribes, wondering how a single drop could reveal so much. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, returning him to the now. He shoved the book back into the satchel and slung it over his shoulder. Pulling himself to his feet, he reached for his sword. Realizing their absence, he felt a loss greater than all but one, his family. He snarled, taking a defensive position. I may die, but I'm going to take as many of those bastards with me as I can. Several Jurufar stepped into sight, freezing at the sight of the lone Jurslayer. Gareth charged, welcoming his impending doom. He slammed his shoulder in the first Jurufar, grabbing its weapon. He spun around and punched the second, letting the poorly crafted scimitar slice into a third. The Jurufar surrounded the lone warrior, their shock wearing off. Gareth chopped and hacked with the crude and unbalanced weapon, catching another in the neck. He felt something slam into his side, launching him into the cavern wall. He fought to get back to his feet before they enclosed on him, but it was too late. He felt a sharp stab burn into his leg, and went numb in an instant. He tried to fight, but it was of no use. The numbness flowed through him, shutting his body down. Each beat of his heart left him more and more helpless. His chest was getting heavy, then his arms. He watched, unable to act, staring blankly ahead, unable to blink. He saw a familiar hair-covered leg step into view. The Jeruki straddled him, snatching him off the ground. It went to work wrapping him in a thick, sticky web. Gareth felt the thick, silky wraps encase him. He tried to call out, but it was too late. The sticky thread covered his face, blocking out the horrifying sights around him. The dank air of the underground began to shimmer and swirl, revealing a rip in the fabric of reality. It expanded, shifting to a jagged oval of orange and black. The faint scenery of a grassy plain appeared in the black. The tall stalks of grain swaying in the light breeze. A figure stepped through, wearing a brown leather duster. His face was covered by a gold, expressionless mask, and the blue and red jester's cap danced atop his head, searching as always. The silver bells on the ends jingled with each movement. Perryman stepped through the portal, sealing it behind him. A sense of purpose guided his every step, carrying him deeper toward his destination. He glanced down the smooth black plates lining the walkway, knowing exactly where he was going. Though he'd never been here, the visions of the mask told him exactly where to go. An ancient and abandoned city rested in the shadows of the huge crater. He walked along the plated high-rise overlooking the thousands of structures below, each one unique in their own right, though at this distance they were simply dwarven homes. He rounded the bend, spotting the ancient fortress of the Druki. It had been a millennia since anyone had laid eyes on the ancient keepsake, abandoned long ago when Osmodius removed his weapon makers from this realm. The sanctum itself served as a weapon against those who would seek entry. Thank you, George and Lori. The dark stone structure would hinder most, but he was special, unique, you might say. Perryman heard the voices screaming at him, urging him forward. He knew the fortress had to be opened, or had been opened. He could feel it. Why does it call to me? Stop him. Stop who? Him! Lost in the argument within his mind, he reached the doors, recalling the first gifts the Aderni gave Osmodius. He was present that day, the day the dragons were born. The Darkstone twins, crafted by the dwarves and used to model all others. The image of the monstrous creations filled his mind, both exciting him and filling him with terror. How could something so massive truly exist? And moreover, why were there two of them? The memories faded, begging him to continue forward. He stepped into the ancient structure, following the breadcrumbs laid out for him. Naziel stood in the antechamber, holding the attuned dagger in front of the mirror. He watched the mystical flames hover over the mounted sconces, their eternal tendrils dancing in the non-existing breeze. That was the trick to seeing the magic surrounding the mirror. It was invisible to the naked eye, but the waves of the fire revealed slight fluctuations that he was able to identify and alter. Perryman stepped into the room, stopping just inside the door. Why would such a unique Druafar waste so much energy on something he can't begin to understand? Truth was, he couldn't understand it himself, but the mask had a way of guiding him to the correct path. It's strange, really. I have control over myself, yet the mask always seems to lead me where it wants me to be. Is it the illusion of free will or something more advanced? I don't have time for philosophy. That's a hard word. Philosophy. He shook his thoughts from mind and returned his focus to the creature before him. Naziel sniffed at the air, attuning himself to his surroundings. I smell power. Tell me, who might you be? He stuffed the blade into his waistband and turned to face the masked man. Perryman cocked his head to the side, the tendrils of his cap moving like snakes, searching the air for anything within reach. Instinct drove him, conflicting against his desires. He stared at the tiny silver bells clipped to the Druafar's belt. He wasn't sure how he had attached it, but he knew certain he had. And more importantly, he knew what it meant. Naziel studied the newcomer, unable to identify any features beyond humanoid. What are you? There was something different about the man. He was mysterious yet curious, radiating the ancient magics rivaling his own. Perryman watched the Druafar, his head still cocked. He knew he was trying to learn something about him, though there wasn't much to learn. What are you doing? He tried to say. Tried to speak the words, finding his voice in the back of his mind. It was then he realized his will was once again not his own. I'm becoming annoyed by these constant interruptions. If you aren't going to do anything, leave. I've had enough to deal with. Naziel turned, presenting his back to the silent figure. Returning his attention to the mirror, he found the strands of magic he'd tied off, trying to make it work. Perryman took a single step, appearing between Naziel and the mirror. He stared into the creature's deep blue eyes, a rarity for his kind. Caught off guard by the masked man's speed, Naziel took a step back. So, it's death you seek. Very well, I shall indulge you, and then I'll return to my work. Knowing his magics wouldn't work properly, he funneled it into himself, turning his body into a reservoir. Building up as much as he dared, he forced the energies to manifest, altering his abilities. He could feel the power wrap around him. It felt stronger, faster, more alert. But something was wrong. It continued to build around him, growing to dangerous levels. He wasn't sure how much more he could take. Unable to stop it, he let the arcane energy explode from him. Perryman felt the energy build in the Druafar mage. He could smell the tremendous power he possessed, unable to move, unable to cast his own defenses. He stood there helpless to the masked desires. He closed his eyes, anticipating the pain that would follow. The blast wave filled the room, soaking into the stone walls, erupting like a bomb in the antechamber. Perryman felt the energy wash over him, surrounding him on all sides. It was then he noticed the thin, shimmering globe of his own making, protecting him from the powerful spell. His head cocked once again, mocking the mage in silence. He stared into the creature's soul, reading the magics inside him. He was different than most. Something dark and powerful graced him. Nazile's amusement turned to worry. The room was rapidly draining him, and his limits were nearly reached. He wasn't sure how much longer he could remain. One thing was certain. It made dealing with the intrusions much harder than he preferred. I suppose I'll just have to do this the hard way. Nazile drew his saber, preparing to cut the trespasser down. Perryman watched the Druifar draw his sword. He wanted to grab a weapon of his own, but the mask wouldn't allow it. Very well. I suppose you haven't let me come this far, or come to harm so far. He relaxed, giving full control to his master. Nazile swung, using the full speed to cut down the foe. To his surprise, the strike missed entirely, though he knew it was dead on, and the creature didn't appear to move. Baffled, he swung again to the same effect. Perryman watched the Druifar swing at him several times. He moved so slow, like a sloth reaching out for him. The slightest lean made the attacks easy to avoid. Nazile stood baffled. He couldn't touch the man. Perhaps he's not immune to everything. He sheathed his saber and pulled a curved dagger from his robes. If the sword wouldn't do the trick, maybe his arrows could. Or pulled the curved dagger. It's actually a wavy dagger like a Chris. Maybe his arrow's weapon could. The voices screamed in unison, "Protect the mirror!" Perryman closed his eyes, trying to block out their shouts. Gaining some clarity, he glanced back to see the mirror they spoke of. There was something ancient and dangerous about it. Something he felt connected to but couldn't explain. Nazile lunged forward, stabbing in with the wicked blade. Perryman could smell the power radiating from it. It was too much power for one such as him to possess. Knowing he had to do something, he felt his body react to his thoughts. Taking a step forward, he intercepted the Druifar and laid his hands on either side of his head. Nazile didn't have time to react. The figure moved so quickly. A swirling vortex opened around them, and the small room disappeared, leaving the magical stones and ancient mirror behind. Bits of dust floated in the air, displayed by the flickering torch wedged between two large rocks. Holding it up. Shadows danced off the protruding edges of the rough cavern walls. The two Druslayers worked tirelessly, making their preparations. Malachi grunted, heaving a large stone and placing it atop the others. He wiggled it, making sure it wedged itself into place. "You sure this is going to work?" He glanced over at his companion, who was dusting some dirt off his vest. That's hard to say. "It'll work. We just have to get out of here before all hell breaks loose." Ravion gave his vest one last pat, knocking the last bits free. His ear twitched, picking up the subtle sounds in the underground complex. He spun around, drawing his longsword, taking a defensive stance. "Hurry up! We've got company." His fears a reality, he leapt into the air, bringing the blade down into the rapidly deteriorating darkness. Dark-colored blood ran down the length of his sword, revealing the distorted faces of the black-skinned Ofar. Ravion pointed his toes toward the bedrock, letting his ankles absorb the shock of his landing. Feeling the stone beneath him, he spun on the ball of his foot, sidestepping to use the dead Druifar as cover. Malachi hurriedly tossed the final stone into the pile, abandoning his perfectly settled stack. He reached for his dagger, drawing it from his belt. Pressing the sharpened edge against the piled stone, he scratched the dried paste off the side. A glowing scribe shined through the chipped paste, revealing a runed etching. As quickly and carefully as possible, he scratched another one, watching the glowing rune disappear into the stone. Within minutes, the pile appeared as if nothing more than mundane rock piled to perfection. The sounds of battle echoed off the walls, growing louder and closer to him. Stuffing his dagger away, he stole a glance at his companion. Ravion ducked a narrow strike, deflecting another. Fighting like a master of precision, each strike was perfectly aimed in preparation for his next. "You need some help?" Malachi taunted more than asked. Only if you can find time in your busy schedule. I'd hate to put you out, Ravion panted through labored breaths. Placing his strike, he wrapped the tip of his sword up under the defenses of the attacking Druafar. The sharpened steel punctured its flesh with ease. Placing his other hand on the pommel, he thrust as hard as he could, watching the blade disappear through the creature's side. It erupted out the other and stabbed into another of the attacking beasts. The sword buried to the hilt, he drew his dagger and deflected another strike. Thank you, George. Malachi drew his rapier and charged into the fray. Hacking the parrying blow, he cut into the Druafar, clearing a path for Ravion. The sharp pain erupted in his side. Wincing, he spun his wrist, severing the arm of the one that stabbed him. He reached down and pulled the crude scimitar from his ribs. Inspecting the blade, he was sure there was no poison from the rusted iron. Glad it appeared dry, aside from his blood, he discarded the weapon, throwing it into the ranks of the swarming Druafar. Anger in his eyes, he bit his lower lip and pressed on. Squeezing the handle of his rapier, he punched, feeling the metal handguard connect. The curved blade followed through, cutting into another. He shouted over the clanging of swords, "If we're going to do this, now's the time!" Ravion twisted his embedded sword, tearing the wound further. With a tug, he brought it out the side, ripping the impelled Druafar in half. Spinning around, he snatched one of the fist-sized stones off the shelved wall. "Sunstone!" he shouted, throwing the rock into the crowd. The closest Druafar scattered, shielding themselves from the renowned lethal blast. Using the distraction, Ravion fell back, taking position beside Malachi. The Druafar pressed forward, hesitant by the lack of explosion, their assurance growing with each passing second. "Do we have an escape plan?" Malachi gripped his rapier tight, feeling his knuckles pop. "Hey, Mark." Ravion stole a glance at the pile of ruined stones. "We've got two options. Neither are good. Are they all set?" "They are, but we're too close to the blast. There's no way we'll survive it." "We're out of options." Ravion blocked another barrage, narrowly dodging an arrow. "And now they've got archers." An all too familiar thud sounded beside him. He looked over, confirming his fears. Malachi looked down at the thick shaft sticking from his chest. Another arrow plunged into him, sending him staggering back. He looked up at the swarmed Druafar, letting his willpower fuel him. "Get out of here. It's too late for me." "Run!" he weakly demanded, pulling his last sunstone from his waistline. Launching it into the sea of monsters, he threw his arm over his face to shield his eyes. The eruption illuminated the darkened corridors, revealing every nook and cranny from the dusty chamber. Ravion charged into the blinding light, feeling his flesh burn with its potency. The Druafar on all sides charred, their flesh turning to ash. He could see the tunnel entrance ahead. If he was lucky, perhaps he could get Malachi through the ranks before they recovered. Slowing himself, he spun around to look at his friend. The distance was much greater than he'd realized. There was no way to get him, and to come back before they'd be upon him again. "Hey, Josh." Malachi watched his friend spin around. He was calculating, but it was too late. There was no time. Malachi nodded toward his friend, pulling a ceramic vial from his pouch. Shouting over the massive Druafar, he saluted his brother. "Fight well, brother. May your blade be ever sharp and the sun forever upon your back." Without warning, he crushed the vial against his chest. Ravion stared at the broken trigger. "What have you done?" The pile of stone began to glow, revealing the runes marked upon them. Knowing he couldn't survive the blast, he dove headfirst into the small hole, feeling weightless for several moments. The roar of collapse echoed all around him, shaking the cavern walls in his descent. He felt his feet hit, sinking into something pliable yet hard. The water rushed into his mouth, submerging him completely. Moonlight beamed through the trees, illuminating the band of Druafar on the field's edge. Leviathan peeked through the shadows, watching them. He'd followed them for nearly an hour, silently picking them off one by one. What stood before him was a manageable group, led by a single Jeruki. Quietly, he slid his sword from his sheath and leapt into the darkness. Bringing the thin blade down into the creature's spine, he cut neatly, killing it instantly. The Jeruki scattered and collapsed under its own weight, several of its legs breaking in the process. Refusing to leave it to chance, Leviathan brought his sword around, cutting deep into the creature's throat, serenading his blood in the black ooze. The creature's head fell to the ground, rolling several times before coming to a rest. A surprised expression still on its face. Leviathan pushed his gloved fingers through the stringy white hair and lifted it, showing his victory to the squad of Druafar, allowing them to look upon their dead captain. You see this? You work for me now. You do as I say when I say it, or your heads will be added to my collection. Are we clear? The Druafar hissed their response, clearly not pleased by their position, but it was better than death. Good. Now that we have our way, you're going to do something for me. And mark my words, if you fail me, you'll spend the rest of my days. I'll spend the rest of my days tracking each and every one of you down, just so I can slide my dagger into your ear. Bray, quiet. He tossed the severed head onto the ground, letting it roll to the feet of his new recruits. The back way into Marbane is unguarded right now. You're going to accompany me into the heart of the city. Once there, you need to distract the border wardens while I take care of a few matters. The sun beat down, making heat waves over the churned sand. The golden kernels were clumped together from the gallons of blood that had been spilled over them in the past years. Crenid panted heavily, standing over the dead Alfar. Their fragile bodies were hacked in several places and leaking what was left of their fluids into the arena floor. Blood dripped from the dual axes in the half-orc's hands. His heart pounded, the beat nearly deafening him to the roar of the crowd cheering at the spectacle. A sense of pride rushed through him with the acknowledgement of their presence. He felt the thick chains spring to life, ringing out with each link that passed the massive sprockets. Turning to face the gate, he casually walked toward it, throwing his axes into the sand. They stuck blade side up, sinking nearly half their heads into the moist floor. He ignored the crowd. It was defiantly marching toward the ramp. He knew they wanted more. They always wanted more. But he was not here by choice. He'd given them just enough to stay alive. Nothing else was required. Agreed, George. Damn it, Bree. Crennan passed through the iron runs, watching them shift to the crude wooden tunnels. The beams were rough and nailed together, with excess ends protruding out into the walkway. If he didn't know any better, he guessed they were hacked into shape rather than tooled. Rounding the corner, he found his way through the reinforced wooden doors and into the slave pens. The gladiators roared with his passing, their chants and cheers echoing in the straw-covered floor. He felt his face tighten around his small tusk. There was a sense of honor to be had, slaying one's opponents in the sand. He caught a flash of movement out the corner of his eye. Reacting on instinct, he tried to duck, but it was too late. A large fist connected with the side of his head. He jerked, hitting the iron bars lining one of the cells. Before he could react, his aggressor was upon him, punching him repeatedly. Crennan moved his head, avoiding the blows, long enough to see his attacker. The human was larger than any he'd seen, dwarfing even Remley back home. He recognized the man as the friend of the one man he'd just killed in the arena. He wrapped his legs around the man's waist, squeezing him as tight as he could. Draining him of air, he twisted, breaking the footing and allowing him the upper hand. Crennan watched the man fly face first into the iron bars, ringing out from the impact. Rolling from beneath him, he jumped up, preparing himself for another attack. The gladiators cheered louder than ever. Sounds of guards echoed down the corridor, their hurried footsteps running out of time, or counting down their time to arrival. The man stood, grabbing his broken nose, and straightened it with a repulsive snap. Blood trickled from his face. He dropped his shoulders and charged. Identifying the man's plan, Crennan tightened his stomach and set his feet. If the man was going to charge him, he was going to be ready to intercept him. Feeling him smash into his midsection, he brought his elbows down on the man's back, forcing him to the ground. The human gasped, his lungs unable to collect air. He panicked, trying with all his might to catch his breath. Crennan wrapped his arms around the man's midsection, squeezing him. Bending at the knees, he picked him up, letting his head dangle near the floor. Without hesitation, he let go, watching the man crash to the floor, careful not to break his neck. The man collapsed. Rolling over, he pushed his fist into the dirty floor, trying to pick himself up. Seeing his continued fight, Crennan knelt down beside him and punched him in the jaw, snapping his head the other direction. His fist locked and ready to strike again, he looked into the defeated man's face. If you want to continue this, you face me in the arena, not here. He lowered his fist and stood. Several orcs burst into the room, their spears ready to attack any who gave reason. Kryn had put his hands up, letting them surround him. He felt their heavy grips secure him, escorting him to his cell. They pushed him into the small barred room. He heard the iron door slam behind him. Walking over to his bed, he pulled the wool blanket to the side, revealing a thin layer of straw mounted atop a wooden cot. Sitting down, he placed his hands in his lap and recalled the battle in his mind, silently celebrating his victory. There were mistakes, places he could have killed quicker, but he walked away. That was more than his opponent could say. The crowd above echoed through the rafters, signaling the start of another battle. Closing his eyes, he laid down and pulled the green wool over himself. Within minutes, he was fast asleep. Gareth gritted his teeth, pushing the black ooze between them. It ran down into his beard, matting the strands of thick red hair. Spitting the chunk of flesh out, he stared at the remaining Druafar, feeling his hatred focus on the last of the group. Like a demon, he charged, using his claws to dig into any exposed flesh he could find. The Druafar screamed in pain, feeling their hide shred beneath the primal Druslayer. Gareth tore at them, finding the soft spots of his throat. Sinking his teeth down, his head shook violently, ripping away as much as he could. The chunk came free, leaving a large hole in the dying Druafar's throat. He continued to shake the torn esophagus long after the Druafar quit moving. Several Druafar cheered from above, watching the captured animal defeat the weaker recruits. He felt his sanity slipping away. All he could feel was the sticky blood running down his skin. The hiss of their vile tongue echoed in his ears, whispering to him. What was worse, he was beginning to understand it. The voices taunted him, reminding him of his child and his wife, how they tore her apart after they penetrated her over and over again. He screamed, letting his hatred radiate from him. Several red strands of energy shot through the air, wrapping themselves around the cheerful creatures. They were helpless, feeling their bone crushed beneath the tightened grip. They tried to cry out, but the vice-like hold didn't leave any room for sound. Gareth fell to his knees, his anger released from him. He felt empty, drained of his determination. They could kill him now. At least he would be reunited with his family. "Didn't you bastards hear me? Kill me!" he shouted. Nothing but silence answered him. Echoing the summoning the strength to look up, he couldn't see the wicked creatures. He stood and approached the wall. Peeking his head over the edge, he noticed the crushed bodies of his captors. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope. Did they find me? Am I rescued? "Ravion! Kane! Is anyone there?" The silence stung like a hot knife. The whispers resumed in his head. "It's a trap. You're all alone. Nobody's going to rescue you. You know how they get into your mind, make you see things. You give hope just so they can strip it away. You're being broken. You're going to die. Shut up!" He charged the rock wall, jumping as high as he could. His hands pawed the jagged stone, searching for any place he could grab. The sharp mineral cut into his flesh, but he pulled himself. Once again he was free, and this time they wouldn't stop him. Hanging up. No, that's my mirror that's my hat's hanging on. Like the edge of it. It's got all my con badges and stuff hanging there too. And beside that are a bunch of axes that I made. Outside the Aderni fortress, the two powerful figures appeared out of thin air. Frozen in the moment, they stared at each other, taking in what had just happened. Naziel felt the freedom the cavern offered. He could feel the dark stone road pulling at him, but it was nothing compared to the sanctum. Out here, he was the master, and this masked figure was going to learn that. He let his power flex, radiating around him. It swirled and spun, displaying a variety of colors. He knew it wasn't effective, but it was good for show. Perhaps he could intimidate the man with a demonstration of his full potential. "You should have left me in there. I was crushed by the stone, unable to fully harness my powers. Out here, you don't stand a chance." The smile returned to his face. Perryman screamed, hoping to regain control over his body, but it didn't respond. The mask tilted his head, watching to see what the Druafar mage was going to do next. Naziel released bolt after bolt of energy at the figure. They fired without fail, like a barrage of missiles, each one striking their target where he'd intended. Perryman closed his eyes, expecting his death to follow. He felt the power strike him, but it didn't feel right. It was as if the spells fell apart before they contacted him, like he'd dispelled them the last second before impact. But that was impossible. Nobody can dispel magic that quickly. It takes time and focus, neither of which I have. But the facts said otherwise. He remained unaffected. Seeing the magic have no effect, Nazial's smile turned to a frown. He tried once again, forcing every bit of willpower he had into the strikes, but none of them worked. As if somehow the guy was immune to it. Nothing is immune to all schools of magic, not even the gods. Worry gripped him, like a knot in his chest. Am I going to fail? Perryman fought for control, hoping to finish the Druifar mage. He needed to kill the creature before it got resourceful and killed him. Try as he might, his body wouldn't reply. He felt his head tilt further, as if it was curious. A sense of hopelessness washed over him, unable to harm the figure in the slightest. Nazial did the only thing he had the power to do. He smiled. The masked man was too much for him. How anyone could best him with a full array of powers was a mystery. I possess the strongest magics this realm has to offer. Nobody should be able to beat me. Yet this man did so without lifting a finger in defense. Perryman recognized something in the Druifar commander. A sweet stench, the smell of hopelessness and fear emitted from him. It was an acquired taste, one he hadn't realized he liked. Yet it brought a strange pleasure with it. He moved quicker than he had realized, swiftly stopping in front of the Druifar. It was an inch from his face, filling the breath upon his mask. In one fluid motion, he ripped the crisp dagger from the commander's hand and plunged it deep into the Druifar's chin. It erupted out the top of his skull with a spray of blood and brain. The mask pulled the wavy blade from the dead commander, letting him fall to the ground in a puddle of black, tainted blood. The voices in his head screamed, erupting with a pain deep inside him. They separated, filling him with worry and doubt, drowning him in their fear. Among the cries he heard one question. "What have you done?" "It wasn't me. He did it, not me." Crennan argued with the voices, trying to clear himself of their accusations. Perryman felt something extremely powerful flood him, something much bigger than this one mage. He turned, taking a single step toward the fortress. The orange glow wrapped around him, and he appeared in the antechamber, staring into the ancient mirror. A black glow appeared in the center, growing wider. He watched helplessly, feeling the emotions of the voices weeping in his head. The glow grew wider, reaching the edges of the mirror. The entire surface shimmered, releasing a wave of energy. He felt his feet leave the ground, the overwhelming power launching him into the far wall. Hitting the ground, he looked up at the awakened vortex. This isn't good. He picked himself up, looking at the dagger still in his hand. This is too powerful for just anyone to carry, and with this awakening, time is limited. He stuffed the blade under his duster and disappeared from the chamber in a glow of orange. And the story will continue in the order of the Trident Speculum, which I believe I'm going to take a week or two off of doing the live reading. I think maybe the first weekend in June I will continue, and we'll start with Book 2. And before I get done with that one, Book 3 will be done, so we can just jump on that ship. But anyway, let's see. It's all good. Thanks for tuning in, Carl. I already had to get rid of mine earlier. So, thanks for watching, guys. I think you've been pretty active on this one. Had a lot of people I haven't seen on here before, and if you haven't seen the other videos, feel free to go back and watch them. They're all posted on my page. I'm thinking I'm also going to upload all of them to YouTube at some point as well, so you can watch them there. We still got some time to do that, but quick recap. 2-week notice at the job was put in. I'll be becoming full-time author the 1st of June. Well, 2nd of June, technically. Hardback books for Order of the Trident 1 is currently available. Book 2 will be available within the next few weeks. And Book 3 will be going into the works as soon as I get the paperback side of it done. Paperback and Kindle, I'm still working on that one. Audiobooks underway. I've hired some pretty good guys to work on that one. Hopefully we'll see it pretty soon. Upcoming appearances, I've got one next month that I'll give a little bit more detail about as we get